Hi, I'm Shannon McKinnon, host and media producer at Cybercrime Radio. Welcome to Let's Talk SOC, a cybercrime magazine podcast series brought to you by Secureworks, a leader in cybersecurity, empowering security and IT teams worldwide to accelerate effective security operations. Joining me today is Terry McGraw, executive security consultant at Secureworks. We're talking about building a truly effective and efficient SOC. Hi, Terry. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Shannon. How are you? Thank you for inviting me.
Define SOC for us as a mechanism for business risk reduction.
Yeah, I think that's a misunderstood topic. Most folks that live in the cybersecurity world or the life of cybersecurity tend to communicate cybersecurity in terms that we're familiar with. And it's usually around security, efficacy, and the controls that it provides to the business. But the tendency for us to do that actually is not what the business needs to hear about our SOC operations. It's really how we implement business risk reduction. And it's how other folks in your business need to understand it. In reality, the threat landscape isn't a bunch of lone wolf, hackers in hoodies like Hollywood would tend to believe. It's organized crime, largely well-organized crime. And because of that, what you're really facing is a global underground economy that operates as a near-peer competitor to you. And their competitive landscape is theft of your business. So at the end of the day, your SOC is to identify and reduce the risk to your business, because what you're facing is really an existential threat to your business.
What are the macro components of an effective SOC?
So most people, when they think of Security Operations Center, they focus on the S in SOC, which is security. That's understandable, but it doesn't fully address what your SOC is actually supposed to be doing related to that business risk reduction I just spoke of. In order to truly understand risk, you have to understand the threat, what your vulnerability is to that, and what its potential impact is to critical business functions. So there's really three macro components of a high-functioning SOC. Number one, you need a view of the adversary. That's practical threat intelligence. It's your sensing technologies that you use to protect and detect threat tradecraft in your environment. And this is where most people stop building their SOC, and that's a huge mistake. You also need a deep and real-time understanding of yourself, your network, your assets, your data, its respective criticality, and a real-time understanding of when things change in your environment. I always use the example, a self-inflicted wound and an adversary-inflicted wound can have the same operational impacts, but how you react to them is completely different. So you really need a clear understanding of what are critical systems and services as understood by those who are in charge of the business financial viability, right? What is your C-suite and your ELT believe to be the most critical systems and services? And does your SOC share that understanding and are able to apply it in real time when they're doing event triage? So you really need all three of those major components to be fed into your security operations centers and in as near real time as you can get them. I'll give you an example. So if I were going to triage an event, as an analyst, what do I need to know? I need to know, is this a true or a false positive? For example, is this just broad scanning activity that's banging on my firewall, or did something really get popped? If it is a true positive, do I care? Is the activity I'm seeing in my guest network, or is it in a production environment? And if I care, how much do I care? Is this a seller's laptop or the CEO's or a critical set of servers? And if I do care a lot, what do I do about it? Like, how do I contain the threat? And then who do I escalate to and when? Who needs to know about it? How do we conduct our incident response and recovery? So all of those things need to be at the fingertips of your SOC team to answer those questions. In addition, I guess I'm being a little bit verbose, but I think it's important to fully talk about all the components that need to be and why, right? So what we see is a manifestation in today's enterprise environments. There's a divergence between the IT operations and your security teams. And this creates a lot of times an unfortunate lag between responsiveness and security and risk reduction and the mechanisms by which you have to employ to defend yourself against it. So for example, if I see something as a security analyst on your environment and something as seemingly straightforward as implementing a IP block on a firewall, I have to open up a ticket. It goes to IT operations. They conduct a change management process. They get approval for that change. They implement that change because they don't want to break anything in the business. They'll implement the change. They'll test it, make sure that it works, and then they close the ticket. All the while, you have a security responder inside the SOC that's trying to mitigate a threat. And so you kind of now have the security staff as a customer of the IT staff, and then that can create a different KPI system. My key performance indicators are how each one of those systems and teams are doing, and they could be diametrically opposed to one another.
Terry, how do you know your SOC is performing to your expectations?
You really have to put some thought into how you measure what your SOC is doing and how it really informs your business writ large. For example, like if I'm just counting tickets for your IT staff, for example, I call that like counting tires in your motor pool. It's easy to do, but very little actionable intelligence comes out of measuring that. You get a little bit better, so mean time to resolve for a security event. That gets you a little closer to understanding your efficiencies. But if you really want to understand how your SOC is truly adding to your business risk reduction, you got to keep clicking down a little bit. So for example, if you looked at a ransomware attack, I'd like to use this sort of as a vignette to sort of illustrate what I'm talking about. So your SOC performance KPIs. So nearly all ransomware follows a very similar playbook. They gain initial access. They exploit that access to expand their presence, and then they begin conducting reconnaissance, moving around your environment. They'll steal credentials to elevate privileges. They'll obtain and deploy persistence mechanisms so they can stay in their environment. They'll prep for, look for, begin to do data exfiltration to steal stuff from your environment. And then they'll deploy malicious weaponized code, i.e. ransomware binaries that'll explode. And then they just watch the dumpster fire ignite and burn out of control. Okay, so unfortunately for most businesses, they detect that either at the very end when it explodes or right as the binary executable. So they may be able to block the executable. But there's an entire storyline there that speaks to your security controls in that playbook I just articulated. And so if you truly want to understand the efficacy of your SOC and all of the security controls that you bring to bear that SOC is responsible for, you have to look at the entirety of that kill chain. There was a lot of opportunity where an appropriately tuned security apparatus should have addressed in that playbook, right? There's time not to be a victim in that ransomware playbook that I just articulated. And you can derive some measures of security efficacy by examining them in kind, right? So you had an initial access. Okay, well, clearly you had a vulnerability patch management system that was supposed to find what was vulnerable and patch it, right, before you had an exploitable opportunity, or you had a sandbox to weed out phishing. The initial access should have been blocked to some degree. Once the adversary was in your environment, you should have seen the lateral movement techniques, right? Can you determine when a PowerShell script is being used by your admin or by an adversary by what they're calling, right? Are there tools being used in your environment to enumerate your Active Directory, right? Do you know when credentials were dumped out of an endpoint, for example, and taken offline? Can you see staging activity for the data exfiltration? Do you know when your data was accessed? And even if it was that data accessed, do you know what was in that data? And can you attest to its criticality? And then finally, did you see that malicious binary? In that arc of a storyline, there's multiple opportunities and multiple dependencies and expectations that activity would have been seen sooner and earlier. And so when you're trying to measure the performance indicators, it's not just about tickets and not only about mean time to resolution. It's by looking at the security controls and your personnel's ability to leverage those technologies to determine where could I have detected those threats earlier in my kill chain, because that's really what you're speaking about business risk reduction is. Where am I maximizing the investment I've already put in for the technologies and the people, and understanding where in that kill chain I actually detected the threat. So measuring those piece parts are actually very important and give you much more and much greater fidelity in the efficiency and effectiveness of your SOC operations and its sole goal of business risk reduction.
You mentioned the personnel and your team, and I think that's a really important point. How do you staff the SOC appropriately?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first thing to do is determine, what role is most critical to fill and why, right? So, the world of IT is wide and diverse, as are the skills required to do them. And you can't expect a help desk member of your team to also be your network engineer. You certainly can't expect the network engineer to have the skills to do intrusion analysis or endpoint forensics and the like. I have a little metaphor. A neurologist and a proctologist are both doctors, but you don't want them doing a high five in the middle of your surgery, right? So finding what you want that person to do and then clearly articulating the skills required is your first step. And I think, unfortunately, for those that really don't do this every day, who are in charge of hiring, would that be your HR department or even your greater CIO staff, Understanding what role you're really trying to solve for is really the first step. And unfortunately, people just hear IT and security and think it's all the same thing, and it's not. The second thing you got to determine is, can you afford it, right? So after I've determined what I need, look, I think people grossly underestimate the cost of this. I'll give you an example. Right now in the US, US is a baseline. I mean, you can offshore to lower cost centers, but my point is, if you're going to house this internally and organically to the US, a frontline analyst right now with almost no experience, all in costs of the business, 125K. Now, if you're going to staff a SOC, you're going to need 12 of them. Why do I say that? Well, you've got 3 shifts across 24/7 operations. People have to take time off. They get sick leave. There's holidays, et cetera. And you're going to need someone to manage it. So that comes out to about 12 people. That's $1.5 million in personnel costs. That is not inclusive of the tool sets needed, the telemetry devices that they're going to be using. It's not inclusive of your tier 2 threat hunting, your incident response at tier 3. That's just your frontline analyst mechanism. And so a lot of this is, who do I need? What do I need them for? How many can I afford as a business? And are there other ways to achieve that same outcome? So exploring partnerships, for example, where the cost of a singular analyst can get you 24/7 coverage in most cases for a moderate to large size enterprise. So at the end of the day, it's determining what you need. What do you want to build organically? Can you afford to build what you truly want? And you do have to do that sort of that algorithm between your cost benefit analysis between doing it organically, partnering with somebody, or in most cases, you get a hybrid solution. There are ways to vet them too. I don't know if I covered that in previous. So once I have them, like, how do I know I've got the right candidate?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. How do you find them, train them, maintain them, retain SOC personnel?
Again, some of this, it was done empirically by me, right? I led the security operations centers globally for Secureworks for many, many years. And so we developed a 3-phase system to do this well, right? So I recommend you implement a 3-phase process. First, we did a technical pre-screen. So that's just 25 to 50 multiple choice questions that we would give them, in a virtual environment. And we put controls around it, right? So you have time limits on the questions, so they're not Googling them. They're having to be on camera so you can see if they're hunting around for the answers, et cetera. But that was just really to screen out the people who really had no business. They were fluffing their resume. They probably did not actually have the experience to do it or the technical background. And that weeds out a lot of people that are just faking the funk. If they pass that, that's when we would spend some time more one-on-one. We would have a junior leader or shift lead bring them in to ask them more technical in-depth questions, right? Give them some more scenario-based questions to ask if they could reason through, maybe give them a packet capture or sort of a chain of events and have them reason through what happened for you. But we also made them ask sort of non-technical questions or answer non-technical questions. For example, one manager who loved asking the question, give me 10 to 15 ways to make this room dark. And so what we were looking for there is personality characteristics. People were passionate about sort of solving puzzles, right? The person that rolls their eyes and goes, oh, this is stupid, this is lame, that's an immediate red flag, right? Like, how can I be bothered with this? The people who are like, okay, well, I can close my eyes, I can pull down the windows, I can turn off the lights, I can paint over the windows. The people who try to actually solve the puzzle and got excited about that tended to be people who we looked for, right? Because for them, solving a challenge was fun and they had a passion for doing it. And so you get some character indicators from when you do those kind of scenario-based questions. And if they passed all that, my last phase was I had a panel interview between a senior manager and a more technical lead. And that's when we're looking for cultural fitment. Is this person coachable? And that's a key indicator because, some of the worst employees we ever hired were those that were super, super experienced, but believed that they knew it all. People who believe they know it all are dangerous. And if they can't be coached, everyone should always want to be learning and growing. And in this field, you can never stay stagnant. So finding people who are passionate about continuing to grow and continuing to be passionate about cybersecurity as a field and what it means for the defense of the business, those are really who you're looking for. And those are the gems. And it's really hard to find a lot of them. So I go back to my previous point. Determine what you want your core to look like. Look, most businesses' core competency is not cyber, right? It's running their business. And when you're hiring cybersecurity personnel, it's at the detriment to another core function. Usually they're in competition. So find what you really want to keep on staff organically. Find the people that will truly be a cultural fitment for you and augment you. And then I strongly recommend that you partner to complete that 24/7, 365 environment. Because again, Finding a partner whose business is to protect your business will help you focus on your business. And that's what companies like Secureworks and what we've built with our Taegis platform are really designed to do, is sort of bring together all the things we've just talked about into a singular environment.
These are all great tips, Terry. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, doing this well is difficult, and the stakes are extremely high. Again, I can't overemphasize the fact that the cyber threat landscape and what's arrayed against you right now is an existential threat to your business. 60% of small businesses, for example, go out of business in 6 months after a ransomware attack. And how do you forecast for ransomware? Even if you are a large enterprise, having the largest ransomware we saw last year amongst our incident response engagements was a $40 million ask of the ransomware actors. Even large enterprise shelling out $40 million of unplanned and unforecasted dollars can be hugely impactful. People lose their jobs, their livelihood, and people lose their businesses. So we take this incredibly serious at Secureworks. I mean, it's our passion. It's what we do. We truly believe that this is protecting people's livelihoods. And so my word to the wise is you don't have to go this alone, right? Your core business is your business. Don't be afraid to partner when you need to partner. Ask for help when you need to ask for help, and vet those that you have as security partners, right? So, I mean, they're an integral part to your success and to your business, and you should be very, very comfortable that they know and understand the security threat landscape, and they can bring that knowledge and apply it pragmatically and directly to your environment for your protection. And I think that it's really about finding a security partnership. So all the things I said for running a good security operations center doesn't have to be done all on your own. It can be done in partnership, and it can be done quite effectively to a very good outcome at a price point that's probably much, much, much less than if you tried to do it organically.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Terry.
Thank you, Shannon. I really, really appreciate the time. Love talking about these kind of things, and happy to do it again.